Welcome to this, which is Rasa Office Hours. It says it on my little monitor over there. I'm here today with Karen White, who is the Developer Marketing Manager. I actually had to look up your job title because I did not know off the top of my head.
Fair enough.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is that you do besides write fantastic blog posts?
Yep, why, thank you. Yep. So like Rachel said, I sit on the marketing team at Rasa. My background is technical though. I started in developer relations. I've also done some technical writing API documentation, some web development, and then made the transition into marketing where I help developers at Rasa learn how to build cool stuff with conversational AI. You might have seen me on the blog. I'm pretty active there. I'm also one of the instructors for the Rasa certification workshop. So if you've taken that, you've probably met me as well.
Great. I'm excited to have you here. And we've actually already got some questions.
Awesome.
So I will warn everyone, including Karen, I'm a little bit out of it this morning. I feel like I've been a little bit out of it for months. So Kevin has a question. Hey team, my bot... What if this was not between me and the things I needed to read, huh? My bot does well at this intent classification and entity extraction, but the core part misclassifies a lot, especially when the same intent incurs different stories. What do I do to handle this? I tried using different core configurations, have tried tweaking it too, but don't know what the best configuration is. Number of epochs / epochs, people say both, / max history. So... my first piece of advice would be to update if you can, because it sounds like you're using, what was the last version where core and NLU were separate?
Gosh. It was pre 1.0, so it's been at least a year ago.
I would definitely update. We've done a lot of things to make it much easier to use. And if you are getting misclassification not when intents are on their own, but when they're part of a longer story, that is a little surprising. Unless what you mean is that the intents are identified correctly, but your assistant is picking the wrong thing to say, which seems like what it is, what you mean. So 2 things I would do. I would save more user interactions as stories and then retrain, and just so you have more training data. And the other thing is, once you update to Rasa 2.x, when you're in the situation where there's a specific intent and then your assistant always has to do the same thing, it might make sense to have that as a rule. So those would be my 2 recommendations.
Definitely. I would also say that if you, it sounds like you might be doing this already, but if you're running in debug mode in the CLI, you'll be able to see exactly which action was predicted. So you'll know kind of why it was the wrong one. And that can be a really helpful clue to sort of help diagnose what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. And then talking slightly to your configuration. So number of epochs or epochs, you'd really only want to tune that if there's a big difference between your training data and your test data. So the more epochs, the longer your model trains for, the more times it updates itself. And the way it sort of generally goes is on your held out test data, you'll do okay on your training data, and over time your curves will start to converge, and you want to sort of hit that elbow, because then it goes up again. I don't think I'm explaining this very well. Basically, more epochs, more likely to overfit, fewer epochs, more likely to underfit, and the sweet spot for a specific project is going to depend on the project and the data and the number of things that you're doing. And then max history, I would only go up if you have very long conversations. But in 2.0, we more than that, we do a lot more sort of like automatic configuration recommendations because of people having this exact problem.
Yeah, great first question.
Yeah, definitely. Solid start. And it looks like Madon also had some info there. If you don't provide any config, Rasa will create one, and that is Rasa 2.0 and after that. Same intent occurs in different stories depending on the utterances are the same for the intent. You can try rules in Rasa 2.2. Yep. If they are different, then use the slots to distinguish them through the role or story. It also, like, it's very normal to have the same intent in different conversations, right? Like, maybe I want to book a trip, and one day I want to book a trip by taxi, and then one day I want to do it by boat.
That's such a good tip, though, about using entities to sort of like distinguish, or like slot values to distinguish like different branching off points in the conversation. So whoever threw that out there, like, such a good tip. It really can like simplify the number of stories that you wind up writing, and reduce the number of intents because you're sort of using that slot value as like the branching off point in your stories.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Aman says, don't overuse rules, question mark. Do we have a specific number? Hundreds, thousands, 80% of our use case gets covered by rules and slots. Most of our conversations flow are intent driven and 3 to 4 turns long. And it looks like the next little bit is a slightly separate question. So this is a great question.
Yeah, I would start off, so the really important thing to remember about rules versus stories is that rules don't teach your model how to generalize. So you're setting like a fixed intent with a follow-up action or multiple actions, and you're not really teaching the machine learning model to recognize any examples that users throw at it that it hasn't seen before. So if you probably can replace a lot of the functionality that you currently do in stories with your rules, but you want to be careful about still having some stories so that you can generalize to unseen input. I don't know if you would have anything to add on that, Rachel?
Yeah. There's the sort of question of scale, right? Like, similar to rules, I'm always like, fewer intents is better, but you also want enough intents to cover the different things that your users need to do. And for a simple assistant, like, the right number might be 3, but for a more complex assistant, 3 probably isn't the right number.
Yeah. I know when I was converting some of my bots from 1.x to 2.0, at first it almost felt like the goal was to convert as many stories as possible to rules, because it feels like you're simplifying. But then sort of like, my thinking evolved, and you really sort of realize, like, maybe that's not exactly the direction that you want to go. You still want to have enough stories that you have like that robustness built into your assistant.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if I feet to the fire, if I were being forced,
yes,
I warned y'all, to pick a good coverage for rules, I would say maybe at most 1 or 2 turns per conversation would be defined by rules.
Yeah, and I would also kind of start with like the low-hanging fruit. Like, there's sort of certain categories of interactions that are pretty much always going to be a rule. Like for your greetings, like when the user says hello, you want to say hello back. Anytime that you start or stop a form, there are some edge cases, but that's probably going to be a rule. Things like FAQs, chit chat, where like no matter when it happens in the conversation, that interaction always needs to happen the same way. So I would start by just kind of like picking out all of those kinds of conversation patterns, converting those to rules, and then see sort of what you have left.
Yeah, I think that's a very solid strategy. And there are a number of different questions. So on second question, slot is set, question mark, means it was set via action, or we have multiple conversation flows based on the slot value. When an action sets a slot, but this slot has no impact on the particular conversation. But some other features, part 2, but some other future conversations, how do we explicitly tell this to the bot syntax so it does not confuse it? E.g., we have 2 types of handover based on the intent/story user that they were just on. Handover type is set via a custom action during each intent call, but can only be used during handover flow to give a different utterance. Okay, so this sounds like the situation. We actually got like a fair number of questions about this where like you want to say, you know, maybe you're using a language with a lot of gender markers, and you've like asked your user what gender marker they would prefer, and you want to make sure that you're always using the right gender markers for that user.
Right.
Would just be an example of where you would use this. And how do we do this using slot is set? So let me pull that up first.
So would you do something like save that to a variable? Like if I'm understanding the problem correctly?
Yeah, I actually think it's in stories, right?
Right. Well, yeah. And so we're saying that it doesn't influence the dialogue, correct?
Reading over the question again. Set via action. When action sets a slot, but this slot has no impact on this particular conversation, but it does on some other future conversations.
Okay.
So how don't we confuse it? Okay, so in this example, just sort of talk through it from the way it's described here. Someone's going through the conversation. We set a slot for them, and we don't use it unless they need a handover, and then we check the value of that slot to decide which of our handover actions we use.
Okay.
This sounds like a rule, actually.
Oh. So would this be something like their reason for contact? So you're like passing that reason for contact over to like a human chat agent?
That sounds right. But you don't want it to...
It's sort of like not relevant unless handover occurs.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, you know, it's relevant to the handover action. I mean, I'm sort of like going out on a limb here and making a lot of assumptions about this question. If it were the situation that I described, I don't know if we would say that it would influence the dialogue, because typically with human handoff, we see developers make the choice not to save that conversation to the tracker. It's sort of, they're being handed over, and like nothing that happens between the human agent and the user is like really recorded in the bot's memory. But I don't know if I'm understanding that correctly or not.
Yeah. I think that what might answer your question is if you use multiple conditions. You don't have to use just one condition per rule, right? So you can say, you know, slot was set, and then you have the steps, and you can have more than 2 steps. Here we only have 2 steps. So if like the slot is set with a specific value, and the user's like, I want human handoff, and you're like, I don't know, you ask the whatever question, and then depending on that intent, and then the value of the slot, you can change what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I hope this is answering your question. I'm gonna have more coffee. And then move on. And if we didn't get, we didn't like answer the question you were asking, Madeline, please just clarify.
Totally.
All right. Yasmin says, is lexical syntactic featureizer used by CRF entity extractor. CRF has a parameter called features to extract features, thus it doesn't require a featureizer. So when would the lexical syntactic be useful? It's been a while since I used the CRF.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, my first recommendation would be to maybe, I mean, it sounds like you have a whole thing set up, but if you're using Diet, you don't need to use CRF because it's all sort of wrapped up together. Let's see, CRF. There we go. Let's check the docs.
So helpful, those docs.
They are. Conditional random fields. Blah 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 blah. Features of the words. Good probabilities. If you want to pass custom features such as pre-trained word embeddings, you can add any dense featureizer to the pipeline before CRF entity extractor, and it will automatically check, find additional defense features and check if they are iterable, where each entry is a vector. It will continue to train just without the added custom features if it doesn't work, if it can't find it. If dense features are present, it will pass the dense features to sklearn CRF suite and use them for training. So the CRF entity extractor will extract some features, but not a lot of them. And I'm not entirely sure what's in the lexical syntactic featureizer. Off the top of my head, I would have to look it up as well. But based on this, you can pass in any dense features that you want in addition to these ones that are extracted automatically, which may or may not be super helpful for all languages. Like uppercase in German will just tell you if it's a noun, not if it's, a named entity. So yeah, so I guess lexical syntactic feature would be useful when you add it and it helps. I'd just try it.
Yeah.
Hope that helps. Oh, here's one that I think Karen might be able to answer. Not that Karen is not able to answer all of these. It's just I can't answer this, so I hope Karen can.
Okay.
If I have multiple business units with each having their own chat flow, how do you host them, assuming I have separate model files? What is the recommended way?
Okay. So we have completely different models. I mean, you're probably, I guess is the question, like, can you kind of like host those on the same virtual machine would maybe be one way of looking at it. The answer there would be yes, as long as you have sufficient resources that have been allocated to that machine. You would need separate Rasa X instances if you have separate models. So that can be one consideration. Would probably need to know, a little bit more about kind of like the requirements of your bot to go too much further into like the deployment structure, but in our documentation under Rasa X, I don't know if you want to head over there, Rachel.
Up in there. Sorry, we were not looking at the docs. Here we go.
Yeah, so I would probably point to under Get Started. You're probably customize your deployment, I think. Yeah, it's going to have lots of information about installing on Kubernetes. But yeah, you're basically going to want to kind of do this twice for like two separate like Rasa X instances, one for each bot.
And I don't know the answer to this, so I'm just going to ask. In general, is it more cost effective to have several smaller VMs or one just big old chunker?
I mean, it really, you're sort of like looking at like total resources more than anything else. So I would say, I mean, and that can depend on a lot of things, right? Like in our docs, there's a table that has kind of like the minimum resource requirements that you'll need for a VM. I think it's, yeah, it's probably, I think there's a more detailed, oh, maybe it's under hardware, no. Maybe under Helm chart installation, that one goes like a little bit deeper. Ah, yep, this is very helpful table to bookmark. So these are the resources that are used by kind of each container in your cluster, in your deployment. So that can be kind of like a good benchmark. That being said, the resources that you need are going to vary depending on the size of your bot. So if you have a really big model, it's going to take more resources. So we would recommend starting with this and then scaling up your containers from there, basically.
Very helpful. Thank you. Cool. All right. Next question. From Bruce. I'm trying to create a response that outputs the attribute of a JSON entity. Is there syntax for doing this, such as this is your value, entity.attribute?
That's a really good question. I mean, I haven't tried to do this personally. I would probably start in the docs on like custom response templates.
Is that gonna be in here?
Oh, I think we're in Action Server.
We are in Action Server.
Oh yeah, I think it's probably under Rasa Open Source.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, glossary.
Sorry, just the,
yeah.
It's not helpful, not unhelpful, but not for...
Right, not what we're looking for.
Okay.
Because yeah, your custom response template will be a JSON object. So I would think...
yeah, getting into the entity,
is it under
though.
Channel? No, not channel specific. It's going to be in here. Maybe rich. Oh, custom output
payloads.
That's what we want. So the question is, will this support like something that's in like an object notation type format? I don't know. I would kind of have to try it.
Yeah. I mean, if all else fails, you can, it's the action server, is you could do it as a custom action and call the dispatcher to send the message with your like specific parsing of your specific data structure.
Yeah, I also imagine the front end that you're using is going to be a big piece of this puzzle. Like if your front end is like able to interpret that and like render it correctly. So.
Yeah, I don't know if just trying that syntax will work, but there should be a way to do it. It might be a bit convoluted. Actually, if that's something that you think that would be really useful, maybe make a feature request on the GitHub. I don't know how hard that would be to make happen. I mean, the feature request should be pretty straightforward, like actually doing the feature.
Right, actually building the feature.
Cool. And then we have a 2.0 migration question. We're migrating to Rasa 2.0, and we have observed a rather strange issue. The training stories are the same, and the batch sizes are stored to 832 as they are in Rasa 1.10 by default. However, training accuracy has fallen significantly. Around 10% or worse after the network starts overfitting. We're talking about a change from around 98% to around 89%. Any ideas? Interesting. So it sounds like you did some pretty extensive tuning in your 1.10 instance. Like off the top of my head, something that might have happened is that you might have gone back to the sort of the default config, and as a result, your tuning has been, rewound, kind of. So I would try maybe resetting the your config file so that it's your model parameters are the same as they were previously. If that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty big drop though.
It is. This one I'm honestly not sure about, but I suspect that would be the right road to go down. Exploring like what the hyperparameters are set to.
Yeah. Yeah, it does sound like some stuff was reset. Yeah, and maybe also post about this in the forums. It sounds like this is an instance where it sounds like more information would be helpful.
Right. If you're able to like share your config, that would probably be a helpful starting point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Next question from Yasmin again. I found in the docs that TED does entity recognition, but TED is a dialog manager policy. How does it do that? Does TED do entity recognition? It might take in entities as features.
It does take in entities as features, I believe. But I mean, it should be Diet that's doing your entity recognition in a typical configuration.
Ooh, that doesn't bode well. Sorry, the page is loading pretty slowly, which suggests that perhaps my internet is not doing great. Architecture, user input, feeder transformer, dense layer. Yeah, no, it shouldn't. If you have, if you can post a link to like the specific place in the docs where that was coming up, we can check that and clarify that, because yeah, it's not doing entity recognition. All right, Avinash says, currently we are using Spacey for we're using a Spacey pipeline for Hindi, and when we try to load multiple workers, the Spacey model loads multiple times. Oh, that's a crunchy one. So 2.4 gigabytes times number of workers will create issues with RAM. I mean, they're having trouble scaling up if they use Spacey. Yeah. Because the language model that's big.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is something that I haven't worked with specifically. So yeah, are we essentially like loading multiple models? Like, is there a way to consolidate that? I mean, I don't know.
I think when you install Spacey with specific language model, creak. I do have a new chair coming eventually, so you won't have to hear that quite so much. When you install it, it also installs, if you're installing for a specific language, it also installs the full language model, which is pretty big. And it sounds like there are multiple workers, so like different instances, and it needs it locally every time. And I don't know how to get around that. That might be a question for the Spacey folks. Yeah, that sounds frustrating though. I wish I could be more helpful. All right. Abu says, we have a Japanese chatbot ready, and we're trying to integrate with Microsoft Teams in our company. Our server is a company internal server and will not be exposed to the external internet. We are having issues with configuring Nginx in the Docker container. Do you have any blogs or guides on Microsoft Team integration? And then continued, we were trying Nginx configuration in Docker using self-signed certificates, wow, created with OpenSSL, but with no luck so far. Any pointers on Nginx configuration for internal servers?
So probably a good one to start with would be, I think we do have some guides on Microsoft Teams. There's definitely a section in the docs that should be a good place to start. Under your channel connectors, I think is under there.
There we go.
Oh yeah, Microsoft Bot Framework, I believe, is
what it will be referencing.
Microsoft Teams is like not a connector that I've worked with personally, but anecdotally, I've heard that this was the way to go. And then as far as the Nginx configuration, I would be really curious to learn more about the issues that are going on. Like if there's an error message that's being output that seems specific to the SSL, or
rereading question, configuring it in the Docker container specifically.
Okay. I've had more experience configuring it in Kubernetes than with Docker Compose specifically. If you are using Kubernetes, there are some settings that you can configure in the Helm chart. So if you like go to our Helm chart on GitHub and just kind of do a Control F for Nginx, you'll see like where those you can configure specific ports and like a few other settings. So if you're using Kubernetes, I would say that that is probably what you want to be looking at.
This one?
Yep. Yeah, if you actually go to the code, yeah, and it is in the charts / Rasa X directory and values.yaml. These are all of the settings that you can override in your deployment. So somewhere in here, there is a setting for the Nginx container. One. Yeah, Control F is your friend in this file. Yep, here we go. Yeah, so these are kind of like all of the settings that are available to you to override different things with Nginx.
So if you're using your Docker and Kubernetes as an option, maybe try that.
I think there is an equivalent if you're running Docker Compose. I just can't remember off the top of my head what that looks like. It's been a little while since I've done Docker Compose. But it should be configurable as well.
Hopefully that helps. And I would also ask on the forum.
Yeah, probably another one where detailed answer to like kind of see more of what you're looking at and what you're seeing with the configuration would be kind of helpful to troubleshoot.
All right, we have another question from Shiva. I have a slot which will have special characters such as plus or plus plus. Rasa ignores the example when training. Which pipeline supports this extraction other than Spacey?
That is a really interesting one.
Yeah, that is a good question. So I'm sure something is getting stripped. Like some characters are getting stripped.
And I'm guessing you probably already tried like escaping those characters in the training data file. Not sure if that would work or not, but it's probably the first thing I would try.
it feels like a punctuation removing step.
That's probably right.
Because I think I'm dusting up my regex. I'm pretty sure plus is in the like colon punc range. I mean, like, the very hacky answer is to put something else in those slots. Or maybe even like have an action that rewrites the symbol plus to the word plus. I realize this is not like the ideal, most elegant solution, but it might be a helpful stopgap. Yeah, and I would have to dig through all of the pipeline code to see where punctuation is being removed.
Yeah, I mean, question kind of for you, Rachel, because I generally don't know this, but would regexes be kind of a path forward for something like that? I mean, to just sort of like extract that entity just with a regex match?
Oh yeah, with a regex entity? Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll work. It's interesting that it's ignoring the example when training.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, what kind of entity it is. Like, if they're plus signs, it makes me think maybe it is something that has like a very kind of set pattern to it. But that may or may not be the case. It might be that there's just like too much variation to like realistically capture it with a regex. So that is a possibility.
And I guess the other thing is, if it's what's the variable to set whether or not a slot influences the conversation? Because you haven't set that to true, it won't be used.
That's true.
I think it's like influence conversation.
Oh yeah, I guess so. I'm guessing if you're extracting the slot to, assuming that you're like using it somehow, like in a downstream workflow, it sounds like maybe like using it in a custom action. I wonder, I mean, if there are only like a couple of different variations of this exact like slot value, maybe just kind of like cleaning it up with a synonym might be an option. So it gets extracted without the plus signs and you just have a synonym that kind of like adds them back in before it's sent to your custom action.
Yeah, that could definitely work.
But again, like depends on how much variation there is like in this exact entity type that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would look for, if you want to do this just by changing pipelines, I would look for pre-processing in the pipelines that's removing punctuation is probably what's getting that. Because there's no way we ignore non-ASCII characters. A, plus is ASCII, and B, that would be incredibly cruel to the majority of language users in the world. Not intentionally cruel, but yeah. All right. Cosmos asked in the forums about the type policy. Fantastic, thank you. And Yasmin says, is red P based on the LSTM architecture or transformer? And why is it deprecated? Because in the TED paper, red P has better results than TED. I don't know what red P is.
I don't either. I'm wondering if this is something that was deprecated before my...
I'm actually gonna guess
it might not come up.
TED. I'm gonna try and pull up the TED paper because I'm betting. Oh, all of these are TED Talks.
Oh man, yeah, that's SEO sore point there. I kind of own that term.
Okay. So this is actually, I think, a reference to the paper itself. Right. So let's check out the citation. Oh, so it is ours. Bova, who was here last week, and then Akila and Alan are all at Rasa. Huge generalization across dialogue. pull this up in another tab. I will say by that name, I don't know that it's ever been supported in Rasa. Let me see if I can find more information in the paper. This is a good question, Yasmin, because I am learning things. Simplifies the architecture of REDP. Okay, but tell me about that. Okay, so this is the name of the other paper. Proposed architecture, retrieval model. Okay, recurrent embedding dialogue policy. In the ablation study, which is where you take stuff out of the model and see what happens, highlighted the improved performance of REDP is due to the attention mechanism over the dialogue history, which TED has, and a copy mechanism to recover from unexpected user input. The modification to the standard RNN structure enables, so this is not an LSTM, enables the dialogue policy to skip specific turns in the dialogue history and produce an encoder state which is identical before and after the unexpected intent. Develop design investigation further by studying the effectiveness, blah, blah, blah. We do not augment it, but replace it with a transformer. The modifications were motivated by the fact that not all dialogue history is relevant. We can use self-attention in place of an RNN, so there's no a priori assumption. Okay, so the reason why this model as described, probably the reason why this model as described is not included in Rasa. The big problem with RNNs is that in order to handle time step n, you need to have sequentially handled time stepped n-1, n-2, n-3. So you need to step through your data sequentially. And as a result, there's a limit to how much you can parallelize your training. And there's a big time bottleneck with training. So a big reason why transformers are really popular is because you can parallelize everything, because everything pays attention to everything else in its sort of like attention window, and it doesn't consider adjacency, right? By default, the attention weights between, item n and item n-5 could be exactly the same as between item n and n-1. So just from a sort of like making your life better standpoint, an RNN is probably going to train more slowly than a well-optimized transformer that does the same thing. Yeah, so this recurrent embedding dialogue policy, again, I have not seen it actually used in Rasa. It might be available in maybe a very early version of Core, possibly, definitely before my time, but it's not going to be as fast to train as the transformer policy that does the same thing. I hope that answers your question. This would have been a great question for Bova when he was here, because he wrote the paper. The broad question. What is the best route for a music search assistant, from John?
Sorry, say that one more time.
What is the best route for a music search assistant?
Okay, so this would be like something that's either searching, an API or something for like Spotify API or something, or maybe files on your local computer if it's like a personal assistant. I'd say, so I guess let's like kind of talk through like some of the considerations for that use case. I think, and I don't know if you have thoughts on this, Rachel, kind of like with any sort of like search use case, there's like such a huge variety of like entities basically that you need to recognize, like song titles, artists, I don't know,
potentially
like
lyrics,
yeah. Like how would you go about like making sure that those are...
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and I think it depends on the audience, because if it's a musical audience who like wants to know about like key signatures and stuff, then it's pretty straightforward, because you can have like Music Genome Project, I think, has a lot of information on different types of songs. You can be like, give me something in a major key, I don't know, 6/8 time. Is that a time signature? I don't know. I'm not a music person. By like an artist who's still alive or something like that. And then you can go through and use those fields to whatever API it is that you're looking for. But me, as a not very musically literate person looking for music, I usually either know like a snippet of the lyrics of what I'm looking for. So looking up something in a lyrical database could be helpful. Or I know, like, I can kind of hum the tune. And that's like that is rough, right? That's a very difficult signal processing problem. Because a lot of the ways that sound search and matching is using acoustic landmarks, which assumes that you have the same underlying sound signal, and me humming something is not the same as an orchestra playing it.
Sadly, no.
If I could, I mean, I wouldn't be at this job. I'd be the vaudeville hummer. Or I'm trying to like find new music, in which case I want songs like this song, right? Which is sort of like the Pandora seed approach. And it's an assistant, right? It's a music search assistant.
So you're probably building out some kind of form.
Yeah, a form.
And I mean, I guess it's also going to depend on your API, you know, like what required fields are needed to actually execute that search. So it's probably, you know, what your API will let you do is probably going to kind of inform the design of your form quite a bit. And also, you know, depending on like what kind of format you need that to be in, kind of like how much variance it's going to allow to like, you know, are misspellings going to completely throw things off and like cause the search not to work, or is there kind of like a little bit more resilience built into the system? So yeah, I mean, if we were looking at just kind of like the simplest like possible, you know, like find me like song title by artist.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even, I mean, just like in your like slot mappings in your form, sort of like capture like whatever the user says and use that to kind of like build out your API request. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the whole spectrum of like very like simple interpretations of that use case, like all the way to, you know, sort of like recognizing what Rachel is humming and like finding similar songs. So
I think the big challenge there is like, what sort of information do you have access to, and then how do you tell your users what they need to tell you?
Right. Yeah, because I mean, just like the design of like how you're prompting the user for that information can really go such a long way towards like making sure that you get what you're asking for.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a fun project.
It does, yeah.
Oh, I did think of another way to do that. So you could try to do like pitch detection of somebody humming and then transfer that into like musical notation. And look up stuff in musical notation. Simple, straightforward weekend project. Yeah. Oh, sounds like a fun project. You share it when you're ready.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Manon is clarifying about the slot was set. The understanding was right. The slot which the action is setting should not impact the current conversation, but a future one down the road. The bot has a way of knowing how to interpret slot was set. Does it mean the slot is actually being set immediately after the action, or is it supposed to check for the condition, as both have the same syntax? So I believe the slot was set just like checks the slot and see if it's good. And I think you can have it as like the thing that triggers it, but the examples that we have in our docs are just when you get the intent that would trigger the rule starting. At that point, it looks up the slot. Does that sound right?
Yes. Like it's the intent that actually like triggers it, but it's not going to trigger unless the slot has been set. I guess would be another way of rephrasing that.
Yeah, so you could slot the set You could set the slot to Chimney Cricket at any point in the conversation, and then
like the rule actually won't take effect until your kind of like condition or trigger intent sets off the rule.
Yeah. Thank you for saying the words I'm not doing good with. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Yasmin says, can I install Rasa X on Windows 10 without using Docker/Kubernetes? Yes. I think we actually have a Rasa X local install video that's on Windows 10. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah. It is installing Rasa X locally on Windows 10. And you should not need Docker.
Yeah, if you're just running locally, that's probably overkill.
The Windows 10 Docker installation experience is also involved.
Oh, I have not tried that.
I would, if that's a problem that you're struggling with, use the executable. Trying to do it from the command line will only end in tears. Or at least it did for me. Okay, so Abu, who is asking about the Japanese language and the spacey language model, says, our chatbot will be in a single location on a single server. Nope, this is not that one. This was the I
know
configuration, the Nginx ones.
Oh yeah.
Kubernetes is overkill, so we've decided on Docker. It's 2:30 a.m. here in Japan. Sorry, I'll show the error informer. No worries. I know it's a little early.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in so early.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the forum is going to be the most helpful place. This feels like something a Kilo would know.
Yeah, I would say for sure. I think there are. I'm not 100% positive in the docs, like some guidance on Docker Compose, like Nginx settings. But I'm not sure. It's been a little while since I went over there.
Yeah, so maybe you can find stuff, I guess. All right. Cosmos. Oh, it's just clarifying the REDP acronym. Pawan says, is there a way to add multiple user utterances before wanting to trigger the dialog policy? Asking because chat users naturally tend to send their messages in multiple utterances. I'll try looking at the API to add events to a conversation, but it doesn't allow multiple user-uttered events. So this would be like something where someone's like, one message, hi, I'm looking to rent a car next Thursday, and it's 3 messages, but it's intended to be taken as like a whole thing.
Totally. Ooh. So you don't want action listen to kick in until after the user
pauses for a bit, I guess.
This is a great question. I mean, I would think yes, because you can customize like action listen, but I think the first question is, how do you decide when the user is finished talking?
Yeah. I guess the way that I would probably do it would be to, if I knew that people were likely to do multiple turns, wait for no typing.
Right. You could just like put a delay on action listen, maybe. I actually don't know if that's the right approach, but
but then there's
in the action server docs under action listen, like, is there?
Let's find out.
Maybe an example.
Let's see. Actually, it would be an event, right?
I think it's wherever like the default. This
is where users say stuff.
Right.
You said a default. Oh, it's a special action type, isn't it?
No, I think it's just one of like the default action types. Actually, it might be under just actions, maybe?
Next action. Upper domain version.
Okay, maybe not.
Latest action. I definitely have read.
I know. Did you love when that happens? You like very like clearly picture like what the article looks like in the docs. You're like, how did I get there?
Yeah, I don't know where it is off the top of my head. Yeah.
It might be under, oh.
This is a great question.
Indeed.
It feels like it should be doable. Oh, yeah, you could pause it, huh?
Right.
Yeah. And I know there's a way to like do timers, because reminders like proc after a certain amount of time.
Right. I think I guess the tricky thing would be kind of like, what logic do you decide to use to set that timer? You know, like, do you just wait to see like if the next user action, you know, doesn't come within like 3 seconds, and then you like send the bot response? I mean, you would definitely also want to have some stories that looked like that in your training data.
Yeah. I mean, that is the advantage of stories, right? That if you have like examples of that, it can extrapolate. I'm trying to think if there's a way to do like an I'm finished button.
Yeah, there also could be some kind of like UI design choices that would sort of like, even though they're sent as multiple, like the user is hitting enter like 3 times, it's sort of like consolidating that into like a single block of user input before sending it to the bot. I mean, really kind of an easy fix might be to do something like just kind of like a gentle reminder to your user that like your bot understands best when the message is sent as like a single message.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would explore like pausing the conversation and just kind of like customizing the action listen so that it allows a few inputs to come in.
Definitely an interesting design challenge.
It is.
And I agree, like particularly like depending on your user population, definitely something that people tend to do more or less depending on the situation.
Definitely.
Yeah, if you come up with a good solution, I would love to hear about it. Or even a bad solution. If you come up with a solution that works, I'd love to hear about it. Any guidance, and this is from Manan, any guidance regarding Rasa X on AWS ECS? We have everything on AWS ECS except Rasa X, which is on EC2. Kubernetes is not an option due to its pricing, and we are exclusively using AWS.
I know that our engineering team has worked with users doing this, but I don't know the details, unfortunately.
I know even fewer details than you. Yeah. I would maybe. I mean, if you have a Rasa X Enterprise, I would reach out to the CSE people you're already in contact with, because they're going to be able to help you the most good with this.
Or even, you know, in the forum would probably be good. Our engineers are also there, so we've got a pretty good chance of getting the right people to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would ask on the forums. All right. Next question. And I think we're getting a little bit close on time. Yeah, so we're going to be able to get I think probably maybe one more. We have a bot, this is from Cosmos, that changes moods according to what has been told to her, e.g. tired, eager, insulted, friendly. Is there a way to make her response different depending on the mood, apart from replacing all utterances with actions?
Okay.
I feel like rules.
Yeah, rules would be a really good solution to this. I mean, you would need basically, just kind of one rule per, or even response selector that's triggered by a rule. Actually would be a really good way to handle that.
So this is like the FAQ things.
Exactly. And basically it's anytime that you have, like one particular question that should always have the same answer, or not always question, but, like if you have like chit chat, every time the user says, "What is your name?" the bot is always going to say the same thing. So it's almost like a way of creating sub-intents so that you can like really simplify those categories of questions that have kind of like a one-to-one, lots of different answers.
Yeah, I would try the response selector. Yeah, and Bottom suggests some maybe trying slots. Yeah, I would definitely like set a slot for like what the mood is, and then you could use the if you were using a rule in a response selector, use the mood in the slot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because it would depend on whether this is just kind of like a one-time exchange, like if the bot says something that responds to the mood, or if it affects the rest of the dialogue. If it affects the rest of the dialogue, you would definitely want to save that to a slot and then have like different story flows, like depending on what that slot value is.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And Yasmin has shared a link to where the TED policy is, so I will take a look at that. All right, so I think that's going to be about it for this episode of Office Hours, where we've been answering questions.
Before we go, we do have a special discount. We do have a special discount for the Rasa Summit. It's coming up in early February. So this is a discount that's just kind of like for our forum members and Rasa community members. It's $50 off the ticket price. So normally those are $75. This discount bumps it down to $25. And lots of amazing speakers are going to be there. We've just announced our first round of speakers. Rachel is speaking, and many other folks. So if you go to rasa.com/summit, you can see kind of like the names and descriptions of all of the talks that we've listed so far.
And there will be more to come.
More to come. Yeah, so stay tuned. And we hope to see you there.
Yeah, we would love to have you. The link is in the chat for the video. Wow. And I'm going to go have more coffee so I can get other things done today. Thanks so much for joining us today, Karen. Thanks everybody who asked questions. Really good questions today. Lots of hard questions.
It's good.
Which is good, right? Means you're doing cool stuff if you have hard questions, right?
Definitely.
You're very welcome, Cosmos. We will be back tomorrow for the reading group. We will be working on continuing with the blog post that we've been reading, which is sort of a survey of common sense and what that means in NLP. And we should be finishing that up. And then on Friday, we're going to be working on live coding. And last year, in 2020, in December, we started working on sharing an assistant using Rasa X, and then I got distracted by installation issues, and then I got distracted by other things. But this time, we're really doing it on Friday, so y'all will be able to use the FAQ assistant that we've been building in live coding. So hope to see you there. And Office Hours will be back next Wednesday with somebody else. It'll be me, but it won't be Karen. It'll be somebody else from the team. Thanks so much for joining, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you later.
Bye.